Okay, I got to publish with her, as one of the other student writers with her, and there was already another student in the process. Currently, I am writing another manuscript where I am the primary author and she's helping me. And also, I'm fortunate to write another manuscript with Levi, who's also joining us in the panel today, and Dr. Heidi Bacon is helping us in the process. So that is the phase one. But phase two is how to get this task going, right? Ongoing, especially when you are a student writer and you have your coursework and PhD is like, you have a lot of things happening. You have your life and everything. And that's my phase two. And for me, that is the most important thing, to stick to something like this. And I've just boiled it down to 4 points, like, working within a timeline. Once you've established the team of writers, we get to, and this I learned from Dr. Bancroft, she always has this 2-year plan. And then the first semester would be, okay, this is where you nail down your research questions. What's your idea? What's the literature review? And your second semester is where if it is a data collection, or this is my data collection phase. And your third semester is the coding phase. And fourth semester, you are writing it all up and revising and redrafting. And this working within a timeline really helps, because as students, a lot of things come. As faculty also, they have other responsibilities. So if we are committed to a timeline, like meeting once a week or something like that, and just write that baby step, take those baby steps, write 1 or 2 paragraphs at a time, that really helps. Second thing is writing for the journal. My concept of writing as a student was, I have to have everything, and then I select my journal at the end to publish. And she told me, first of all, that no, you need to first select the journal that you intend to publish, see the scope of the journal, and then write for the journal, because some journals might follow APA standards, some journals might have a different referencing system, or they might want a lot of, elaborate literature review. So that kind of helps you. So I have gone into so many journals to see this. Does this topic fit the scope of this journal? Otherwise, you end up sending it and you get a rejection. You don't want the rejection. You can have the revise, and that's our strategy. Revise and resubmit. That should be the strategy, And then for me as a student, it's very important to set a writing day or time, because you have your coursework, you have your job, you have your family and things like that. So setting aside at least few hours in a week to write and get to and practice that thing of writing is so important. And also willingness to redraft. That is like going back to the team with your material. And this can be sometimes intimidating, but I have taken criticisms, like really constructive criticisms, that has helped me in my writing and also in other, in the coursework that I do. So this is my phase 2. And this is the habits that I really found it helpful, during this entire process of working with the faculty. And you always have the faculty as the guide at the point, because you are kind of inexperienced in this way, but they know so much, they have published more. So they give you those insights. So it's just, going back and forth with that. So that's like summing it all up.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for being brief, so we'll have plenty of time to discuss. I really appreciate your preparation. Our next student on the panel is Levi Meyer. Levi is a doctoral candidate for the PhD in Educational Administration. His focus area is higher education. Tell us a little bit about your experience with publishing with our faculty, Levi.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Cran, for inviting me to speak today. So I don't have as much experience as Sandra. She is she is awesome. And that's why I sought her out as part of my research team whenever I had a publication idea that actually came from my preliminary exam. And part of one of my answers from my preliminary exam, thought this would make a good publication, but I needed to assemble a team. And I sought Sandra out because she's an expert in learning theories, and I brought Dr. Bacon in as well because she's just a great writer. She has a way with words, and I learned that very quickly in her classes. So I assembled my team, and right now we are working on a manuscript about motorcycle safety and how learning theories are incorporated into motorcycle safety. And Sandra and Dr. Bacon have been great guidance for me because they've done this and I have not. It is definitely different than writing a paper for a course or something like that. And just to go off a little bit of what Sandra said on her slideshow, the time schedule is pretty wild whenever you are publishing. That is something that I have experienced. Time can get away from you very, very quickly. We started our manuscript in like October, something like that. And I feel like we haven't made very much progress, but it is amazing how life can really get in the way. And if you don't set a time and be very diligent about writing for publication, time can get away from you and it might not get done.
All right. Thank you so much, Levi and Sandra as well, for sharing their experiences. Let me introduce now our special guest and chair of our discussion time here. Tonette Rocco, PhD, is professor of adult education and human resource development at Florida International University. She is the author of 11 books, including the Handbook of Scholarly Writing and Publishing and Writing for Scholarly Journals, a practical guide to developing and publishing a manuscript. She is an award-winning scholar, writer, and mentor, and the proud owner of a 51-page CV. So you're going to have to excuse my many omissions of her extensive background and expertise in this brief introductory caricature. Thank you for taking time today to be with us, Dr. Rocco, and I'll let you take it away for the rest of the session. Thank you.
Being an academic is perfect for me because I'm a list maker, and a CV is nothing other than a list. And I have just submitted, well, it's published online now, but I was asked by the editor of Human Resource Development Review to write a paper on the differences between a conceptual manuscript or article and a theoretical manuscript or article. And so that's published and out there, and I think it should be a useful guide for some people wanting to know the differences between types of manuscripts. So far, what I've heard, well, Sandra's doing a research study, it sounds like, or gave a nice plan for one in a year. Levi, you're doing more of a conceptual paper, I think is what I understood, correct? Yeah. I want to address one thing that Sandra said more than once. More than once, she went back to how her life constraints. She had classes, she had a family, she had this and that and the other thing. And I want to point out that faculty have all of those restraints too. We all have children or grandchildren. We have classes we have to attend. Deans will fire us if we don't show up. And then we can also get in trouble if we're not properly prepared. So, I mean, there's multiple layers there too. And we have all the same commitments. And I have found that people that are good writers, or not good, because I'm not a good writer, but I am more or less a prolific writer. And I like this team idea because I generally like to find myself somebody who was an English major, because English isn't my strength necessarily. But now I forgot where I was going with that. I do that all the time to myself. So anyhow, I think you need to be aware that we all have constraints on our time. I know where I was going. But the people that are solid writers, consistent writers, are the people that writing is just part of their everyday life. And I do something on some writing project every day. And it's just part of my normal. And I don't even think about spending time. Maybe I'd be better off if I could organize myself that way, but I haven't mastered it yet. Have you, Cecil?
Have to unmute myself. Not even close. I've never mastered that. And, you know, I think, Tonette, you really hit on the key here. As many of you know, it's practice that makes perfect. age-old adage that couldn't be more true. You have to practice, and daily practice, I think, is really the key, because you're producing something.
Mhm. And there's a variety of tools and ways to do it. And when I was looking at Levi's resume or CV, I was struck. Well, first I was struck by the motorcycle program because I didn't even know such a thing existed. And then I was struck by how many different things I saw on his CV that he could write about. And how many different things I saw that Sandra could write about. And you also talked about getting an idea. That was another thing that you said. And I create an idea list sometimes. And I've gotten to the point where I not only have to have that idea list, I have to put down on that list who I talked to about that idea. So I don't go off and do it with somebody else when I'd already had a conversation and whatnot with another person. And I have to do that because I have ideas at the drop of a hat. And my biggest problem is saying no, but that's my problem. So you guys came to this. How many do you want to be faculty? Levi, you're faculty now, correct?
Well, as of February 11th, I'm not anymore. I've accepted a new position at a community college in Alabama as the assistant dean of instruction.
Okay. And are you planning to try to move up the food chain in academia?
Yeah, that is the idea. And publications are definitely a part of that, even in the community college realm.
Yeah, but that kind of changes what I would see you writing about. Because if you're going to be a dean of instruction, to my mind, you would start writing about different aspects of curriculum and instruction, challenges that faculty have with course development or preparation or whatever, or issues you might have with helping them and mentoring them in course development, course instruction. So, I mean, I would see that as changing and not being so much on the manuals and the motorcycle stuff.
I completely agree.
Now, are you going to be in a technical? Is it mostly a technical college, community college?
Yes,
Technical?
it is.
So it doesn't have any four-year programs?
Nope. Very, very technical. Mostly certificates, actually.
Okay, well, I'm seeing that's a little different too. I don't even know of anybody that writes about how you develop a certificate and do that kind of work. There's plenty of faculty on this thing. Does anybody know of anybody that does that? I mean, I know of curriculum and instruction and people that write about all aspects of that, but I don't know about anybody that, but it's somebody's got to. And if nobody does, that's a great niche for you. And you could, advance yourself by becoming the expert in that one thing.
Absolutely.
So I sent you guys my CV too, not to overwhelm you, just to get a sense. One of my research interests is writing. And I have done a couple of papers on how to teach writing and what happens in a classroom when you're trying to teach people to write. And I've tried all sorts of different things. And none of them work instantly. Because writing is a process, and you were talking also about the length of time. And I can have a project that can last 5 years before it's done. I had one paper that we were rejected, I think 5 times. Each time we were rejected, we took that feedback, incorporated it into the paper, fixed it, resubmitted it. And finally, when it got accepted, it was accepted pretty much as is, and it won an award. So that was nice. But that paper came off of a Facebook post. It started because some of my students were making fun of me. And I made my GA, who was part of that group, copy down all those posts. And then we started, I had those posts and I organized them into kind of an outline, and we went from there. So ideas come from all sorts of places. Where do you guys get some of your ideas?
Well, mostly from reading. That was one thing, like, during the first year of doctoral program, I didn't have a solid direction in which how my dissertation or my research interests are going. I had a research interest in math. That was the thing. So what I was advised by my advisor was like, you cannot start writing on an idea unless you read what is already happening in the literature. So reading the articles, what's happening, that actually helped me a lot, especially when I'm coming from an international background. To know what is happening in US and how I can compare in that way helps a lot, because you have different paradigms in which you view the same idea. So that's a new thing for me. So yeah.
I find I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Yvonne. Go
I
ahead.
find that my interest comes from sometimes societal problems and things that I'm experiencing or have experienced. So for example, my background or my research interest as it relates to international students transitioning to the US and challenges support system came as a result of my experience as an international student. And then my interest as it relates to veterans transitioning to the civilian workforce and utilizing higher education as a transitional tool came from a societal interest or problem when I was living in Tampa, and I noticed so many veterans were homeless, and that piqued my interest as it relates to veterans, and considering my background in law enforcement. And I also had to transition to what we would call the civilian world, and I know the challenges I encountered. So that's what piqued my interest.
Yeah. So you get ideas from the literature, you get ideas from personal experience. I took both of those and ended up as a grad student. Well, there's a guy named John Oliger, and John Oliger was, I don't know how to explain him, but he was at Ohio State and he resigned his tenured position in protesting how things were going in general and against mandatory continuing ed and whatnot. And Phyllis Cunningham, a colleague of Cecil's, wrote in a paper that Ohio State had just been terrible to this guy, but she didn't go into it in depth. It was just like a sentence. And that piqued my interest. And I pursued that, and I wrote a couple of papers about John Oliger, and that I started when I was a grad student. And those papers ended in a book publication. It was my first book. And it was on the professionalization of adult ed and John Oliger. And so you get ideas from all sorts of things. You know, some people say something, but one of the points with this is when you're a doc student, you only have so much time. I mean, I know I picked on you for saying that, but the truth is, I think it's a little harder to be a doc student than it is to be a faculty member, depending. Deans that make faculty teach 4 classes each term, that's not fun. But, you know, so you've got to weigh these things, but you write a class paper, and if you can turn that class paper into something, it's not an instant thing. It's a reworking, it's a revision, it's maybe bringing on the person who was the teacher of that class. Maybe it's bringing on someone else, or maybe a couple of people to help you rethink it and further develop it and get it out. I don't know if any of you know Josh Collins. He's at the University of Minnesota. He published, in the end, all of his class papers. And you talked about time, and it took him, he started doing that when he came to me as a doc student, and he finished just before he went up for associate professor, just before he went up for tenure and promotion. So it took him 7 years, I'd say, to finally get that goal reached. Of course, those weren't the only projects he was working on, but nonetheless, he set that as a goal and he did it. And I'll bet for the most part, you have papers that you could turn into something. So are there other students on this call? Because most of you look like faculty to me. So how would you approach a faculty member if you wanted to work with that faculty member? How would you go about that?
Well, I can tell my story of how I assembled my team real quick. So I had this idea from my preliminary exam, and I reached out to my dissertation chair and I said, hey, I think this would be a very good publication idea. And she agreed, and she asked me what I wanted to do with it, who I wanted to work with. And I said, I want to work with another student. And that's how I sought out Sandra. I wanted somebody very versed with the learning theories. So she could really iron out any wrinkles on that aspect of things. And that's how I found Sandra. And then the next thing I wanted is somebody who was a really good writer. And Dr. Bacon, I've been in several of her classes, and whenever I would turn something into her, it would come back all kinds of edits and suggestions. And after I made those changes, and I would just reread, a sentence, man, that reads so much better. Why can I not just write that way the first time, right? And so she was a phenomenal writer. And so that's how I assembled my team, with the help of my dissertation chair, Dr. Donahue, kind of pointing me in the direction I needed to go, and then letting me sift through the weeds to find the exact people.
I want to address something you just said. You said, why couldn't I do that the first time? I think we put an abnormal amount of pressure on ourselves to be perfect writers. And I think that idea comes somewhere from grade school, middle school, high school, where we think we're supposed to write a paper in a week and it's supposed to be perfect. We don't learn about writing as a process, and there's not a shame in writing an imperfect sentence. The crime is if you get good feedback and you ignore it. Not to say that you take feedback directly as it's offered all the time, because sometimes that feedback is around this one thing, but in order to truly address that feedback, you maybe need to start at the beginning of the paper. Or maybe you need to address it, but in a slightly different way than what that reviewer editor has shared. But anyhow, you writing a perfect sentence the first time, it doesn't happen for very many people at all. And even those people that are very good, I write with Masha Plakotnik. She is the best technical English writer I have ever worked with. She's Russian. She's in Russia. She's a dean in Russia now. And but she's still the best technical English writer I've ever worked with. But she doesn't have very much imagination. And so that's why we make a good team. She can edit me because I talk like I'm from Cleveland, which I am. So, you balance, and you find people like you guys have talked about. You find people that balance out your skills. One of the things I find when students want to write, I think the best thing is for the student to make it known that they want to write. And if they go to a faculty member to write with them, I think it's best, but none of this is ironed in stone, but I think it's best if they have something down. Like, what's the purpose? What are the research questions you're playing with? Or even a preliminary draft, or maybe even a full manuscript that you've developed and then you've had a problem with. In fact, going back to Josh Collins, he's brought me in more than once after he's submitted a manuscript, gotten feedback from the reviewers and editors, and was stuck on how to deal with them because in his head, his paper was right. So, and you do that to yourselves. We all do that to ourselves. So I'm just saying, if you're going to work with faculty probably rank order their writing projects and come with something solid. Even if you're working with another student, that's always good. I got a request this morning to do an autoethnography with a former student who's faculty at Kansas State now, and two people he's mentoring. He wants to bring in my daughter and a student that I still have because he wants to do an autoethnography on the collected papers dissertation process, which is something that I've done quite a lot at FIU. And how you do it, what the benefits are. And he sent me a one pager with a purpose, research questions, and what he thought were the reflective questions to get the autoethnography started. And so we could start from there with some feedback, whether or not I'm in, and all the rest of it. So for those of you thinking about it.
I think when I was writing, I totally agree with you, Dr. Oko. When I was writing my second manuscript, I was asked by the faculty member to submit a one page of what I'm seeing, what are my questions, and it should be one page. And somebody else told me, like, if you can summarize your research in 2 sentences, then you are a good scholar in the field. But, you can keep talking about it, right? But she made me, Dr. Bancroft made me to write it like one page and submit it. And that was the way, and it helped me to think through when she was like giving me reviews. And especially, and I'm also grateful for the, when I came into the research, it was my first semester. I hadn't taken any of the research methods courses at that time. So it was as if I was put in the deepest part of the ocean without knowing how to swim, and just to survive with the floating. But as I progressed in the doctoral journey, we were backed up by all the research methods courses and other courses where we had to critique articles, come up, disagree and give those arguments. And especially in some of Dr. Bacon's class, because we got, and especially I got feedback on my class papers, which some of my other faculties told me, like, you can present it as a conference, start presenting at a conference, get reviews from other faculty members, and then write it into a paper, see how it goes. And so that also helped in this process. So just wanted to add to that. Yeah.
What does Dr. Bacon teach? I'm thinking it's not English or writing.
Science education.
What?
I think science education, secondary science ed.
Okay,
That's
Bancroft.
Dr. Bancroft.
Oh,
I'm sorry, Heidi. Sorry.
That's okay. I'm language literacies and
Yeah.
culture.
okay.
So my work is at the intersection of language literacies and culture, and I'm a qualitative researcher at heart and by trade. And I specifically enjoy discourse analysis, narrative inquiries, and I tell people stories, especially people from marginalized communities, and my work has a social justice bent. But Dr. Bancroft is like the consummate science educator, well-versed in quantitative, qualitative, mixed methods. And she is the most organized person I know. And I feel truly blessed also to be working on a couple of projects with her, because there's not a day that goes by that I don't learn from her and with her.
that's good. It's good to have a colleague like that.
Heidi shared with me a recent publication of hers that just really blew me away. I didn't understand about half of it till I got really deeply into it. Really quite fascinating paper.
Yep, it's live now.
Knowing what you write about, Cecil, I can totally understand that. Heidi's more in my realm than yours.
Yeah, for sure. I'd invite Heidi to share it with everybody here. It's really a terrific piece. That was in the Journal of Literacy Research. Am I correct about that,
Yeah,
Heidi?
Journal of Literacy Research. It went live the day before I left for ATE.
Very good. So it's fresh, very fresh stuff.
Well, and I don't want to, this is not my bread, but I just want to take a minute to say that I became intrigued with the idea of new materialism and new materialist theories. So I started searching out those presentations at conferences, probably as soon as I got to SIU, up at the International Conference of Qualitative Research in Urbana-Champaign and at Literacy Research Association, and then started getting into the literature. And I felt like one of the women who I had worked with, I felt like her story was literally calling me to write it through this lens. So that's how this came into being, and it's been quite a journey.
Uh-huh.
And that's all I'll say.
No, but I mean, that's how we get ideas too. I mean, you went in depth into this theory and it resonated with you, with someone with a personality that you know, and you turned it into something. I mean, and that's what we do. We make connections and we make connections. And then when we put it on paper, we make those connections meaningful. And so they'll be useful for other people in some way. And that's all we can hope for. But I mean, there's lots of ways to get ideas and to make it work, but it sounds like a fascinating project. And SIU has a history of producing some really good methodologists. Isidore Newman, who died, a couple years ago, came from SIU. And some other folks who I've just forgotten their names, but I know more than one person from SIU. Anyhow, so do any of your faculty have assignments in their syllabi that foster writing for publication? I mean, I have had, if I have a class that's a master's class that doctoral students also take, I make the doc students do a book review of a current book and publish it. When I ran a conference, I used to have everybody write the class paper in terms of the guidelines for the conference. They didn't have to submit to the conference. It wasn't a requirement, but they had to do it as if they were doing it for the conference. And that kind of facilitated. Out of every class, I'd say about 8 to 10 people did submit. So I did some things like that. So you're shaking your heads that you have some faculty that are doing some of this. So
Yes.
how?
Yeah, so we have this intro to doctoral studies, and thanks for reminding me about the book review. In fact, my first publishing experience was writing a book review, and and this intro to doctoral studies was like in your first year, and you have to take it. So you kind of walk through, how to write your CV, how to write a book review, how to, write a conference draft or a grant proposal,
Okay.
and also a preliminary 7-page description of your prospectus, like, not the actual prospectus, but the prospectus. So in the book review session, I did write, and some of my classmates also at that time, they got it published, and mine was also published for Mathematical Association of America. So that was my first experience to get it going. And we were taught by, and then we have other research methods courses, like one which Dr. Koran takes, like, EDUC 505, it's like Intro to Quantitative Methods. And so there it was like really detailed, like how to write in accordance with the APA standards. That's when that's when the change happened from the 6th edition to the 7th edition, and we were all new. We were all new with that, and how to write a quantitative methods paper in the way it needs to be. And so and then other one was like the qualitative intro to qualitative research methods with Dr. Bacon-Sticks, and she also took advanced research methods for us. So in several of these research methods courses, there were like designated times where you get to think through the ideas, and you can write a conceptual paper. And I also took action research methods with Dr. Bacon, where I actually got through writing some of the things which I want to later, well, I imagine and envision and dream to later transform into some research paper at some point. But then there are other courses which are not research methods courses, but end of the course, you need to write a literature review paper and or cite an article and critique an article. And that came as part of Dr. Fadi's class. So we were trained in all that right from the beginning in different forums. And there is a specific course also, in addition to all this, to sum it up, which is writing for research and publication, that was taken by Dr. Pulterak. So again, you get those things going. So, and I have to say that, when I was writing for Dr. Bancroft for the research, actually, I caught up with the wave once I took my classes with all the rest of the faculty members. That helped me to sharpen my writing, because I come from a British English writing background where we like to complicate things. That's the way it needs to be. But when you write for an American audience, it needs to be like stated clearly and simple. So, those reviews helped me, those feedback helped me to sharpen the polish my writing. So that also helped. Yeah.
Well, I teach in Southern Florida, and I can't have, the majority of the people in my classrooms speak Spanish first. And when I first got here, I had to take a diversity, class, workshop, whatever. And I was really disgruntled because I thought it would tell me something about the Spanish speakers, the Latin cultures that were going to be around me. And it wasn't. It was the typical black-white thing. Not that that's bad, but that I would have gotten in Ohio. And things are different here. But anyhow, I was on a plane going to Mexico. And it's when they used to have the signs on the back of the seats. And it said, fasten your seatbelt. That's 3 words in English. And then in Spanish, it was 3 lines. And that was my first clue into why my students were having such a hard time writing, because their language, their first language, because my background has nothing to do with teaching or literacy or any of that. I came from a college of business into a college of education. Anyhow, so, that was my first clue. So then I could start to break it down and start to try to explain, why that was fine there, but it's not fine here, and how you get that way. But in my working with, I think when I work with Dutch folks are not what I would call wordy. Neither are Russians, but just about every other group that I write with, they are. I write with a lot of Canadians. And heck, half the time when I write with a Canadian, half the time, all the time, I have to have a dictionary. I have to have a dictionary with me so I can figure out what they're talking about. So, it just is what it is. And you said something earlier that I wanted to tell a little story, because I think we get stuck in this idea that only doc students can write and publish. And that it's, it's just like maybe you get into a doc program and all of a sudden you can do these things. Well, I got asked to help an author from Human Resource Development Review on his paper. He turned out to be a master's. He wasn't a master's student anymore. He had just graduated. I helped him with that project. He and I have published, I think, 4 other papers together. And he's got a chapter in the book Cecil and I finished, in 2020, 2021, whenever we finished that book. And he's got a chapter in my new handbook. And we have a long-term relationship, and he just got into a doctoral program. So everything that I've written with him so far, he was not even a doctoral student. So I think, we limit ourselves sometimes in our thinking about who we can write with, that they must be faculty or they must be, certain rank or have certain credentials. And sometimes people without any credentials at all can be very good writers.
I would agree. I've spent the last couple of months serving, I'm not sure if it's as interim content editor or ongoing content editor for the Common Discourse section of the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy. And we are having practitioners, classroom teachers, many of them who have master's degrees are writing up their experiences. And then I'm putting that into an edited column where they're talking to each other around a question of some substance.
Okay.
And so that's been really interesting. And it's been a wonderful learning experience. And it brings a nice touch to what is known as a practitioner journal, but often there's not many practitioners writing in that journal.
Right.
And so I think it's really a unique perspective, and I have just enjoyed it tremendously. And I've enjoyed where I've worked with teachers from Australia, the United States, and it's just been incredible to see how they're approaching some of these topics and teaching about them and creating these dialogues in their classrooms.
Mhm. I think we lose a lot of knowledge because we've created this kind of boundary around academic writing. And so people, in the trenches feel that they can't or shouldn't. And we need to break, they still need to follow the rules. We still need, we have our rules for writing, whatever, but still, we need to break that down and make it a bit more accessible and encourage people. I think it's a matter of encouraging people.
Yeah, my first professional publication was drawn from my undergraduate honors thesis. And I was encouraged by a faculty member that I didn't know in the English department who told me to submit it. I had no idea what I was doing. This is over 40 years ago. And I submitted a draft of it and got it published. I also remember.
I'm much younger than you. On my CV, my undergrad was in 90.
You are much younger than me, Tanette.
One of the things that I've appreciated is teaching the master's action research course and now bringing doctoral students into it so they can conceptualize an applied project from which they may be able to publish. And we don't require human subjects, but I always encourage students to get human subjects so they can publish. And so one of our former master's students she just had the most amazing project. She's now a doctoral student, but there was a call for a book chapter, and her master's action research project fit that call absolutely beautifully. So I mentored her through that chapter. I am the lead on that one, but she's going to take the lead on our conference proposal, and that one's coming out in August. It's coming out in April. So there are just so many opportunities, when we're open to those.
Yeah.
And I think it enriches our work when we publish with students.
Most of my writing is with either a student or a former student. I don't know why, but it just is. And it's funny, I've been writing with this guy who was at a different university, and he just got hired by our university. And now I'm the chair of his third-year review committee. And I said to I've never been in that position before, where I have to evaluate somebody I write with directly. So we'll see if I can be fair. But I think we've got a lot of ideas. You guys have given me some ideas for things that I could do in the future. What other things, what kind of things do the students here think faculty might do to help you get a writing idea, to help you improve your writing? Are there some students that haven't spoken that might like to share? Nobody wants to share.
Give them a little time. You EDUC 505 students, I know who you are. So let's give you a chance to speak up, because I think very few of you have spoken, if at all.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Well, this is Lyle Gross. So I'm someone in my situation again. I'm a first year student, second semester, come from a CTE background. So because of that, I'm a square peg in a round hole at times. So, but I come from, I think, possibly an interesting perspective again that may be a little short sometimes again in educational research. And so I'm from the electrical training and robotics and all types of stuff again. And so I've got this background again, which is highly technical, that I don't know that I have writer's block, but I haven't figured out my path yet.
Writer's block.
Yeah, so I find myself wanting to write about things related to CTE, technical, apprenticeship training, transfer credit, all these things that happen within my audience again. So
And why
But-
not? Why can't you write about those things?
Well, I've got, my brain is not settled on any of these things that are, I need to settle on 2 or 3 that I think are going to be really, really
Why?
have a great path again. So otherwise I can't feel like I'm writing on 12 different things. So,
I do all the time.
but that's why yours is helpful. So it's like, it sounds like I need that list again started of all these different paths.
Well, I am interested in everything. I'm interested in everything. And that's probably why I write with a lot of students, because they're writing about everything. And so I just contribute. I'm generally last author. It doesn't make any difference to me. But, you know, there's something to be said for writing with what your passion is. And as far as whether what you're writing about is going to make a big splash or be the right direction, I don't think you can know that when you start. Brad Shuck started writing about engagement. When he came in for his interview, he said he wanted to look at engagement, employee engagement. And I looked at him, I said, what's that? And who cares? And I'm an editor of a journal, and I said to him, why don't you write out your ideas for a perspectives piece in this journal? And he hadn't even applied yet. And he started to do that. But now his first presentation, nobody showed up. And now he's standing room only. And now he's famous for engagement. But he couldn't have known that when he started. It could have just been the thing he did. And it just, you know, but he was at the right place at the right time. And you don't know that. You don't know what's going to happen. Now, transfer students seems to be a hot thing right now to me. But, you know, sometimes my dissertation was on disability disclosure. But I wrote about John Oliger. I wrote about privilege. I wrote about all sorts of other things in addition to what my dissertation was on while I was a doc student. And none of them clicked.
Yeah, it's like,
I
I
got
think,
lines on my CV.
yeah, I think I know what my first 12 what my first 12 topics are going to be. I just don't know what my first 1 or 2 topics are going to be.
Which one do you like the best? Which one do you have some work on?
Transfer students is by far the most challenging for individuals. I think that's one of my focuses again is helping those who in the technical fields again who don't have the transfer opportunities. So that's what I've been doing most of the research and reading on so far.
That's a tremendously important topic.
It
Yeah.
is. I'm sharing a dissertation on that. My doc student is looking at students that transfer from a community college into a computer science program in a 4-year college.
And I think that's an equity field right now too, because most of the people that are in the community college fields again that take these technical subjects again are in these minority populations again. So if they'd ever had a chance to gain steam, it would be right now.
Mm-hmm. So maybe that's a place you start.
Okay.
And I would encourage you to reach out to Dr. Alice Four.
Yeah, he's my he's my he is my mentor actually.
Because he's doing work on this right now.
Yep.
And I know I've read a couple of his manuscripts. And so I think that would be a natural fit to perhaps support a project or get some experience.
Yeah, he's my advisor, which is
Okay,
well chosen one. We're matched up very well. But your action research course actually sounds very interesting to me. Again, though, Dr. Bacon.
I love the course, but you'd have to talk to the students who take it. But we really dive into research and writing an action research and writing a research proposal or for a research project. So
how many terms is the course?
It's technically 1 term, but then it's usually paired with a practicum.
Okay.
Where students carry out the research. And for doctoral students, they may or may not do a practicum. I always encourage them to work with their advisors so that their advisor has input into that process. I see Sandra shaking her head, nodding her head.
Yeah. So we have at FIU, we have an action research sequence, and it's 2 courses. And I think the practicum is the third. So, and you talked about IRB, and IRB can be tricky if you're trying to do it for a class. At least at FIU, especially you're talking about some of these projects could involve kids because you're doing teacher ed, and IRB could, take the whole term.
So I've developed an amazing relationship with our IRB, and we generally get those applications through pretty quickly. And if there's any issues, they'll contact me. It's not unusual for me to go in and meet with them, and we'll talk through whatever issues there are. I have the director come and speak in my classes. So it really helps to get to know the IRB and get on really good terms with them, because you just know what they're looking for, you know what their concerns are, and it really helps expedite that project.
Yeah. Sounds like you guys got it worked out. Valerie, you were going to say something?
Actually, to go off of what Lyle kind of was saying, and what the question was, I found that previous class with Dr. Hunter Johnson, who gave us the ability to, for assignment wise, pick out a journal that we were interested in, what they required, and then taking on even at the final, the literature review, and writing up a topic that we were looking at and looking out at the literature and seeing what it was. That ended up going into another class with Dr. Gran and the quantitative research. So I'm kind of taking one assignment and bringing it into another class, and then trying to build on that, which also stems into my dissertation. So I find that it's very useful to at least take one class's assignment and bring it into another class's assignment. I appreciate that because you get feedback from both of those instructors as well.
Right. And do you want to be faculty when you're done with this process?
Actually, so my background's a little different than most. I'm in law enforcement background. So I had 13 years in law enforcement and decided to go back and get my master's. So my undergrad's in criminal justice, but my master's and what my PhD will be is in workforce education and development. So I wanted to get out of law enforcement because of the police involved shootings and police brutality, and try to find some resolutions of what police can do on their end to try to resolve these issues that we're facing. And so I'm doing that on the workforce edge side. So trying to train and looking at diverse policing and seeing how that helps with the community relations as well.
So you're saying you want to stay a practitioner or a consultant?
More like a practitioner, but I'm right now just taking whatever I can and looking at it broadly and not narrowing my focus right now.
Well, I think that it's important to take, and I work with a couple of retired, well, actually, I've had several students that were police officers. They've retired now, and some of these issues are just rich for research and for writing and for publishing.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you're talking about police officers' views on some of these things, because cops are getting painted with one brush anymore. And there's different kinds of cops. I mean, they're not all one. And the bad ones, and there are bad ones, are the minority, but we don't see that generally. And we're talking about in one of my classes about stress at work and trauma. And I bring this up, the police involved shootings, because we don't think about a police officer, whether the shooting is right or wrong. That's still trauma for the person that shot somebody else. It's workplace trauma. And we just gloss these things over. I mean, I think that's a rich area.
Yeah, and it's not just for the officer as well. It's for the officers who are working. I can tell you right now how I felt when I heard I'm shot in the face.
Yes.
I think about that over the radio to this day.
Yes.
So it definitely impacts your decision making in that field.
Yeah, and I think it's something that we need more active, not necessarily active, but people with actual police experience to consider. And maybe, to consider, in a group project or whatever, but I think that's an important area and needs to get out there.
Thank you.
So
I
We
would,
have just about 2
sorry.
minutes left.
Okay, I just quickly wanted to add, my name is Fanny Masna, and I am, well, I just started my second year of PhD. So I'm like that person who started her degree in COVID. So I think one of the hesitancies that I feel as a new student is because, okay, I took care of my core classes, you know, go by the book, and now I'm at that phase where I have this research journal that I made myself, and I am writing all my ideas and my thoughts, and I'm exploring all the you know, all the possibilities and my interests. So I come from a political science and women and gender studies background, and I am focusing on the policy side in the higher ed. And you know, my aim is, and my goal is to be you know, work either in policy and higher ed. So, and that's where I am now. And I think one of the major things that I feel hesitant about is starting research and reaching out to people that I haven't take classes with them yet. So I feel like one of those barriers for me, because as I also am a newcomer, so I'm just like, oh, okay, so how do I go do about that? I think there's just that always this hesitancy of, oh, how do I go introduce myself? How do I, because when I look for faculty that I would like to work with, I look at their resumes, I look at what they're working on, what their research is. And I feel like, oh, this would be the best person, or this would be, you know, it would be nice to talk to them and speak to them. So I feel that is a big issue for me as a new student that's coming into the program.
you said you were in your second year.
Yes. So again, I just started my second year.
Okay.
Fanny,
Yes.
you know that we are trying to launch an ed policy research center here in the School of Education. So I would love to talk to you.
Yes, I actually did not know that, because as I said, that since I literally just started during COVID, so I was all the time online. So I haven't had the chance to actually meet someone in person per se. So, and it's like, oh, you know, it'll be nice to, you know, be around humans again,
Yeah.
not just
So
by
are you on
monitors.
campus now? Are you on campus
Yes,
now?
yes, I am on campus now.
Well, come and see me, okay?
Oh, I would love to. Thank you for that. Yes.
But you know, you can also set up a Zoom appointment with somebody to talk through some of these ideas. But this policy issue, I mean, there is a lack of faculty in all fields that do policy work around those issues. And so if you can develop that and learn to write about that properly, that, I mean, when I say properly, because there's a whole, I mean, you can actually get a degree in policy.
Yes, and I actually reached out to the Paul Simon Public Institute, and I have been actually meeting with them virtually since the last semester and just trying to get in touch. And they have been really good about sending me articles to read and just to, you know, be like, oh, this is, you know, how to do this, these things.
Right.
So again, I'm in the reading process and the literature process, and I think I have narrowed down what I would like to do, because again, including all the policy and the women and gender issues and higher ed. So now I'm at that part where I am trying to be the most brave person and start reaching out to people.
You probably know that the Simon Institute doesn't do education policy work. So we're going to try to fill that gap here.
Good, good. And you know what? When you're afraid to reach out, think of it like this. All they can do is say to you, no thanks. And if you don't reach out, you've already said no thanks. Because they can't know you're interested unless you approach them. And even through an email. I mean, you know, it doesn't have to be a big deal thing. It's just one step at a time. And if somebody says no thanks, so what? There's another person down the road.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, Dr. Oko. We are over time, so we're going to go ahead and close out this session. I want to thank our two student panelists as well, Levi and Sandra, and really all of you for contributing to the discussion. Our panel discussions are our best attended sessions in our symposium series. Everyone seems to enjoy them the most. And so, but it takes everyone, it takes all of you participating. So I'm just so grateful for your participation today.